All right, hey everybody, it's indie author Nick Belisi. We're back for another Tuesday Night Healing, part 11. Tonight we're going to do something that I've talked about doing for a little while now, something that I have quite a bit of experience with from going through it myself. But we're going to talk about child custody battle. Now, it's a rough subject, you know what I mean? People going through this, they're already having a hard enough time, but it's kind of like I was going to use this platform to talk about like what to expect, my personal experiences and stuff like that, and kind of get some insight for anybody that may be like just starting to go through it for what they can expect. Tonight I'm going solo. Stormy has some stuff going on tonight, so we're going to get this rolling. Child custody. What's the definition of it? So the definition of it is a legal fight between divorced parents or split parents, two people who had a child together, and they need to determine who's going to take care of the child. So why do people go through custody court? Like, why can't they just resolve it on their own? Well, sometimes when parents can't agree, they have, a bad breakup or anything like that, they need to have a third party come in and basically help them decide who's the better parent and what is going to be split between them and how visitation's going to go and holidays and child support and all of that stuff. And it's supposed to be in the best interest of the child. Now, how do you prep yourself for something like this? Well, obviously you and your ex didn't work out, which is why you're in this situation and why you're going through this at this point. So to prep yourself, you want to get as many questions on the table answered before you start going through this. So some of the questions you want to have answered, to present to the judge or to the mediator or however the case may be, which we'll dive into all that, would be, do you have a full-time job? How old is the child? The judge is going to basically ask you, like, what school district is better for the child? Where have they been going so far? In my situation and stuff like that, me and my child's mother, we lived together up here in the northern part of New Jersey, like the very top, and then she was always from about an hour south, or I guess east of where I was. So when we split up and stuff like that, she wound up moving back there, so it was kind of like an hour, but it still is like an hour between us, so it makes it difficult to have a ton of visitation and stuff like that when you constantly have to be moving around. So the judge is going to want to know, like, where is this child's life, like, established? Where is its roots and stuff like that? But, when it's real young, like for us, my daughter was, like, less than 2 years old. She was right before her second birthday when we split up. So she didn't really have roots and stuff like that, so that didn't really play, into effect and stuff like that. But obviously if the children are older and they've been going to school in the same district for a long time, it's going to weigh in. So you want to have that information. Also, like, what's your living situation like? They're going to want to know where the child sleeps, what they have access to, what the neighborhood's like. Those are good things that you want to start mapping out and stuff like that to prove that, you're the better parent in the situation. Another thing is, like, you want to have, like, important people on your side to want to testify for you and, write letters of recommendation and stuff. And some of those people might be like a babysitter or a teacher, or, maybe if you're into religion and stuff like that, you can get like a clergy to do it, or anyone just that could be a positive influence to help you show that, you could be the better parent. So what kind of arguments, like, you're going to want to have, like, some arguments ready, because you're going to want to be able to ask the tough questions and stuff, especially if you're in a relationship where maybe the other party really isn't a good person or they do bad things. So, if you have a lawyer, they're going to help you do it, but if you don't, you're going to want to think to yourself, what are important questions like, do I have a suitable living arrangement? Can I provide emotional support for my child? You're also going to want to consider, because if you don't go with a lawyer, you're essentially, the judge is going to hold you to a certain standard on court conduct and what you can ask and what you can't ask and how you're going to go about asking it and stuff. So, you really want to weigh the options. Yes, like, a lawyer is very, very expensive. My whole child custody thing, all in all, costs a little more than $100,000 over 4 years. So it can be, an option that you have to weigh at that point. Obviously, if you go into it by yourself, you're going to save a ton of money, but are you really capable of representing yourself? Do you know enough about the law and what to ask and stuff like that to be able to do all that? And it's something you want to weigh out. Another thing that you want to have prepped too is you want to make sure that you show up to court in formal attire. You don't want to show up there looking like a degenerate, because if you do that, the judge isn't going to take you seriously. You don't want to have wild, crazy hair or any of that going on, because it doesn't send a good message. It doesn't say that you're responsible enough to handle a child, because you're not taking it seriously. So the first thing is to really get into it. You guys have split up. It didn't work out. Things weren't going good. Now one of you has filed for child custody thing. In my situation, I was the one that filed. We had an event take place, and there was a restraining order and stuff involved, and I thought that was a ploy to get my child taken away from me, so I wasn't going to allow that. So I went and I filed for custody of my child. And the first thing that they're going to make you do most of the time is they're going to try to send you through mediation first. Because rather than waste the court's time, if you could have like that impartial third party assigned by the court, or if you hire a private mediator, they could be there to kind of say like, hey, temper your expectations, like what you're asking for really isn't worth it. But you also want to, have that person there to kind of like de-escalate the situation. Because in a lot of situations when you split up, especially if it's fresh, there's still going to be a lot of arguing and stuff like that. So if you have that other party there, they can kind of like tone it down just a little bit. So what do you expect in like a mediation session? So, whatever you do with it, the mediator for at least approximately about an hour to 3 hours, depending on how long it goes. Mine never even lasted a full hour. The mediator is going to begin to explain the process and the conduct and the guidelines, and, they want you to try to come to some sort of resolution. Even if you could just come up with partial things, you know what I mean? It's still less that the court has to digest, and it shows that you're trying to be proactive. In my situation, the mediation, I think the longest one lasted maybe like 20 minutes, just because we were so at each other, and the mediator could tell right then and there they're not going to come to any sort of resolution whatsoever. So mine didn't last very long. So you're going to want to determine what your priorities are. You're going to think about the issues involved in your parenting, like the financial ones, where you're living, all of that stuff. You're going to want to have that all ready for the mediator, so when you sit down and talk to them, you're going to say, well, this is what I could provide. This is the evidence that I have as far as like what I am as a parent and what I can do for the child. You're going to want to take into account the cost of mediation. Now, if you go through a court-appointed one, you know what I mean? It doesn't cost anything. It's just something that the court provides. But if you go through a private mediation, that could be expensive because they're going to be charged by the hour, and if they have to travel and stuff. So it's definitely worth taking into consideration. You absolutely have to manage your emotions. You can't be going in there screaming and yelling and stuff like that, because, yes, although you're in the mediation, they're not supposed to talk to the judge and say what happened in there, because it's supposed to be a off-the-record type deal. That not necessarily means that the mediator won't say something. You don't know. And would you rather take that chance? It's not really worth it. So it's best just to keep your emotions in check and know what's at stake. Another thing is you want to be aware of your communication, how you're talking to the other parent. If you're just sitting there and disparaging them and stuff like that, the court don't want to hear that. My dad said it my entire time going through child custody court and stuff like that, and it's just like, you're just a number to the court. You don't mean anything to them. You don't know them. They see hundreds of these, thousands of these. Like, you're just another number to them. Their whole job is to hear what you have to say, determine whether you're lying, and then put the child in the best placement. They don't care about you personally. It's not a personal thing. So you want to, try your best. I know it's like an emotional thing and stuff like that, but you want to try your best to just not disparage the other parent or go at them or scream at them and yell at them. And it is difficult, and I have gone through that before, so it's easier said than done. But it took me to go through it and stuff like that to realize that in my own situation, I should have handled it with a much different approach, and things could have turned out a little bit differently. But another thing is you want to prepare for roadblocks. So the other parent might be saying things like, well, they did this and did this and this and this. So you kind of like want to know what it is you're preparing for. Obviously, they're not going to come out and tell you, but if your relationship ended because of a certain way or anything like that, you're going to know what they're upset about, so you can kind of prepare. So if they sit there and they know, like when you were together, you had a drinking problem or something like that, you might want to have something set aside as to how you're rectifying that issue. Maybe an AA chip or a letter from somebody saying that you're getting help or doing whatever the case may be. Or in my case, another one of the roadblocks that came up was that, oh, he has BPD, he's not mentally competent. So you want to have things like a psychiatrist recommendation, that you're getting help, that you're going through DBT or whatever the case may be, because it'll show that you're proactively trying to do something about what the other parent is saying that you're not qualified to be a parent for. Another thing is you're going to want to provide documentation. You're going to want to have evidence. Now, it's strange when it comes to the court. If you have too much evidence, you're obsessed. If you don't have enough evidence, it never happened. So you kind of want to find that sweet spot and only focus on how it pertains to the child. Don't go in there with evidence about, what your ex is doing in her free time or anything like that, because in my situation, that actually turned around and bite me in the ass. Now, I was specifically doing it because I was trying to showcase what my daughter is around when my ex was going out in her free time, and she wasn't watching her or anything like that. But it turned around and backfired on me like I had some sort of an obsession with her, when it's the furthest thing from the truth, because I could honestly give a shit about her. But you want to make sure that, you have those things where you have ways to prove what's going on, but only things that are important to the child's well-being. That's it. So if there's things like the child's being neglected or abused or anything like that, those are the things that you need to have present. And that'll bring us into DCPMP, or here in New Jersey, they call them DYFS. I'll get into that in a little bit as well. It's just an organization that I just don't agree with whatsoever, but we will get to that. So what are the pros and cons? The pros would be that it's control. That parents maintain control of the outcome rather than ceding to go to the court. These are pros and cons as far as whether you should go to court or try to figure it out. Right then and there, if you guys come up with a schedule on your own, obviously that's going to be the best, because you guys know your children or your child. So if you can come up with an agreement and stuff like that, rather than letting an impartial third party come up with it based off of your performance in a court setting, it's better for the child that way. You'll come up with a more, realistic visitation schedule and holiday schedule and stuff like that, and it'll just make for a better outcome if you guys can do it. In my situation, we could not do it. We agreed on most things, but when it came to the actual physical custody, that was where we were constantly colliding heads. So it couldn't be done in that situation. So a consensus. Parents are more likely to follow a custody order if they've agreed to them themselves. If the judge comes down and gives some unrealistic custody order, it's harder sometimes for parents to abide by that, especially like in my situation where the distance is so great. It's not that I don't want to see my daughter all the time, but it's, you go to work, you get up for work at 4:30 in the morning, and then you work all day, and then you have to drive an hour in non-stop, dead-stop traffic all the way down just to spend maybe an hour and a half together if she's not already doing sports or something like that. And then you got to take that whole hour and change ride back. And with the traffic, sometimes it's taken me as long as 2 hours one way, just because the traffic is so backed up, because New Jersey is so densely populated. So then you're getting home, and you're basically just going to sleep. You're exhausted. You head bob, and it becomes dangerous at that point. There's other ways to go about it. You know what I mean? You could do video chat, stuff like that. Yeah, it's not the same as physically being there and stuff like that, but at least it's something. It still shows that you're there, that you're caring, that you're trying. And you try to pick up the breadcrumbs where you can when it comes to visitation and stuff. The effectiveness is also up too if you decide to do it on your own and figure it out that way. So parenting plans and time schedules often meet children's needs better when the parents create them. Again, it's an impartial party looking at this. You know what I mean? The judge may sit there, for example, she had said to me that on Wednesdays, I could pick up my daughter and hang out with her for 3 hours before I have to meet her mom at the mall. So the mall would be halfway between us. So I've found myself, my dad helped me a lot with this. He would go pick her up to give me a head start, so that way when she got back, I had to have her homework done, I have to have her shower and fed in that time, and then get her back in the car and drive a half hour out. So it was like a time crunch, and it was nice to have her, even if it was just for that little bit of time, because, it's still the face-to-face and seeing her and stuff like that, but it made that day very, very chaotic. And if the judge really took into account, because they knew the situation, they may not have done that. They may have said, well, instead of a Wednesday, why don't we just give you every Friday so you could at least have one sleepover a week, and then you just return the child Saturday morning. That would be something more realistic, but they're not in the situation, so they're only just going based off of the templates that they have. So to settle it outside of this is so much better. But the cons come in. So because the mediator has no power to impose a resolution of the dispute on the parties must be willing to compromise. If you're not willing to compromise, the mediator can't do anything for you. They can't help you. You have to be willing to understand that it's a give and a take. You can't have everything. You guys aren't together anymore. You can't be that parent 100% of the time anymore. You need to split it. And it's a hard pill to swallow, especially when you go from being so adamant about being in the house with the child and stuff like that to, it starts out now you're not seeing them a couple days a week, and then maybe it turns into more and more. And like now my schedule and stuff like that, it's like I see my daughter bi-weekly. And it's tough. It's very tough. Like I wish I could sit there and say it's easy, but it's not whatsoever. My biggest thing is like I'll have her come here on a Friday, she'll stay to Sunday, and I'll get used to having her back in the house and stuff like that. So that way when Sunday night comes and it's like deathly quiet in this house, that's what like emotionally cripples me. I always said it's like you hear the pitter patter, running around the house, and then all of a sudden it just goes deathly silent. And you almost feel like you don't have a purpose at that point. You're just like, well, what do I do now? Because they're not there. You're not spending all the time with them. Like me and my daughter, when we're together, we spend every second together, like in the same room the entire weekend. We're always doing something. So, it's just tough. But you have to be willing to compromise. Even if it means biting the bullet, even if it means like going out of your way to do certain things, you have to be able to, just bite your tongue and just say, well, if I give you this, can you give me this? And try to work it out. Mediation costs money. So does court. It's extremely expensive. That doesn't even take into account child custody evaluators, which we'll get into, your lawyers, anything you have to do with like DYFS or DCP&P, anything like that. All this stuff just starts coming up, and it gets real expensive real quick. And things like mediation in court, they take a lot of time. I mean, it could be anywhere from a year to 7 years. Like it's just a ridiculous amount of time, and that entire time money just keeps going and going and going. And if you think about it, with all the money that we dropped and stuff like that with my court case, like I could have easily, that could have been a college fund for my daughter right there, rather than spinning the wheels and just arguing about nonsense and it getting postponed, which is another huge con. If you think that the court is just going to push you through and stuff like that, you are sorely mistaken. They are going to... I think my thing in 4 years was postponed over 20-something times in 4 years. You would go there, you'd pay your attorney to be there and stuff like that, and mine had to drive like from an hour away, and then just boom. Oh, we can't do it today. Something else came up. Let's postpone it 2 months. And you're just like, whoa. It's just eating up your time. And like I had to take leave from the post office and stuff like that, and it's just eating up my annual leave. Because it's like, well, I took the day off, and now it's gone. Nothing happened today. Now I got to waste another day to go do this. And more money. I got to pay my attorney again to drive up here. Like it just gets so unbelievably expensive. And it almost seems like that they want to keep charging you and stuff like that till you get to the point where you're out of money and you're just like, I concede, like I'm done with it. And then they just wipe their hands like, well, we didn't have to decide who gets who. He dropped out. But it's your kid, so you keep fighting. And somehow or another you find your way. Like I was cleaning out my retirement and stuff like that to try to figure it out, and it just became very hard. Now, we're going to get to the part about a lawyer. So there's a couple things to think about when you're shopping for a lawyer. So when you're finding a lawyer, you want to find someone that, one, you can afford, someone who meets that approach that you're looking for, whatever style that you want to go about this, if you want to go about it aggressive, if you want to go about it sympathetic, like you want to find somebody that meets that for you. Someone who generally wants to understand your case, who wants to sit there and be cordial with you and stuff like that, and not just treat you like a paycheck. And then someone who can also be understanding. They deal with this stuff all the time. They know it's expensive. And if you find like a good attorney that is willing to work with you and stuff like that, they'll set up payment plans and all that, and it'll help you. Because then you'll find other attorneys that have such a big clientele and stuff like that, and they're like, well, I need like a 10K retainer just to start. And you watch. That retainer goes quick. I mean, you're sitting there, you're like, oh, I gave him 10 grand. Like, it's nothing. And then a month and a half later, they're just like, yeah, well, the retainer's out because all the evidence I had to collect and back and forth with the other person's attorney and then the judge and everything. And you're just like, wow. Because you got to think these people are usually charging around $500 an hour. So that 10K goes real quick. So you got to be real careful with that. My attorney, I got lucky. She, cut me a big deal and stuff like that because she was still coming up and, trying to get her name recognized, and she was through a family friend and stuff. So she helped me out a lot with that, also with the payment plans, and she was very caring. Like, she talked to me and stuff like that, and she was there to like listen to what was going on and try to give me good approaches about how I should do day-to-day lifestyle and stuff like that. But what I didn't realize is that I was spending a lot of money just talking to her. I was using it as more of like a therapy session as well too, where I would sit there and talk to her and, ask her advice to try to make sure I was hitting everything I possibly could, that I wasn't making any mistakes, that when I dealt with my ex on a regular basis, that I was approaching it as an unbiased thing. And it turned around to bite me in the ass because it cost a lot of money because of that. Because even if you're on the phone calls, you know what I mean? It costs a lot. So what you're going to want to do is, like, when you're communicating with them and stuff like that, try to keep it matter of fact. Maybe to essentially, like, if you do it through emails, it's easier, because if you're on the phone and you're talking to an attorney, the conversation can go sideways. You could all of a sudden start talking about your day, or you could talking about like your favorite sports team or something like that, and the clock's still running. It's still going on. So you got to be really, really careful about that. You got to just try to keep it short and simple. Only use a phone call if you really have to and make it short. Other than that, try to communicate through email and just get everything listed that you want to ask, so they only have to send you one email back and it doesn't cost you a fortune. That's the best way to go about it. Some of the documentation and stuff like that you want to provide to your attorney is if you have any evidence. So I am an avid note taker. I always have been. It's just what helps me learn and helps me remember. I'm also an avid journaler and stuff like that. So like, I'll constantly write about things that are going on in my life, and I can reflect back to it at a certain point in time and remember them as if the memories just happened yesterday. It's just the way my writing style has always been. I created a huge black book of just everything that I was collecting. I actually went as far as to write in my journal every day from when we split up till I think it was like 3 years into it. I didn't miss a single day. And I also kept a corresponding calendar and wrote on it visitation this day, or visitation was canceled this day, or whatever the case may be. I just left notes, but it kept it so that way I had evidence. That way, if any day could be pulled out of a hat, I wrote down just a brief thing that was going on that day, and I could reflect back onto it and be like, okay, so this is the day in question. This is what happened that day. Relive it in my mind, and then be able to talk clearly about it. It was good that I had that information, but at the same time, I was judged because I had it, because then they said that was obsessive. So it could go either way. But you do want to make at least notes on the important things that happen. Like, they never showed up to pick up the child, or the child came home and had like bruises or issues or something like that. Those are the notable things that you definitely want to make sure that you have. But at the same time, don't overdo it, because then they're going to think that it's consuming you and that you're not really looking out for your child's interest. You're more obsessed with your ex, which, like I said, in my case, is the furthest thing from the truth. If you have any photos or anything like that, you have to be careful about taking photos and videos and stuff like that, because at the time, my daughter would come home and she would say certain things. And it's not to dive into it, because it's not about disparaging or anything like that. There were certain things she would say that would be alarming to me. So my attorney at the time told me, he's like, well, you have a record button on your phone for a voice, like a voice recording. So hit that, set it off somewhere in the room, and just let the conversation flow. So that's what I did. And you heard her numerous times in these things say things that were just like irregular. But that's what I was told to do by an attorney. Now, I only kept him for a short amount of time because he really wasn't that great of an attorney, but he was the one that suggested me to do that. Whereas to the other side spun it and tried to tell the court that I was doing so to manipulate my daughter. So one way or another, you know what I mean? You think you're doing the right thing, but it can quickly spin against you, especially if you're going after somebody like I did, who has a very reputable attorney, and he was very, very good and knowledgeable. It was easy for him to spin these sort of things to, do their case. So when you're getting ready for court now, some examples of good witnesses that you want to look for to start putting, in your back pocket is, your child's school teacher, if they're in school, anything like that, if they can explain basically, depending on what your custody situation is at the time, Is the child performing better when they're with you? Are they performing better when they're with the other party? Are they coming in exhausted when they're with you or the other party? Like, how are they dressed? What is their food situation like? Like, what are they sent with to school? You know, if you're doing all the right things, but maybe your ex isn't, that would be a good person to have on your side to write a letter or something like that and explain what they notice. Another thing would be like a religious leader or, you know, someone like that, depending on what your religion may be, to go in there and give background basically to what they see when you're going to church or whatever the case may be. That would be another good person to ask. If you have any counselors that you worked with or anything like that, mental health professionals, if you need to do that, because we are going to talk about what to expect if you have a mental illness going into court, but those will actually help you too, because it's a bipartisan person looking at it from the outside and just writing down what they say. And any medical professionals just in general that treat your family or work with your family or anything like that, because obviously they're going to, again, do it as a bipartisan thing and look at it that way and be able to give some information about it. So another thing that we're going to look at is sometimes when you go through this, when you're going through the throes of court and stuff like that, and you're getting into it, you know, they may assign you a child custody evaluator. Now, I didn't know what this was at first, because initially they had sent us to like a sort of, how do you say it, almost like a counselor or something like that, but they were like a mental health professional, and basically they wanted to get the gist of what happened and stuff. And then at that point, like, that was the second time I got diagnosed with borderline, was from that person. And I went into it because I was pissed off about what was going on in life. I went into it like talking about like all the hard things that I had seen and was going through with my ex, and it turned around to bite me in the ass, because they were just like, well, he couldn't help himself but just to sit there and disparage her, where she went about it a different approach and just was matter of fact. So they looked at it in a sense like, well, he's the one with the issue and this is what's going on. But all I was doing was being passionate about what I was seeing and how I wanted it to stop. That's my defense with it, you know what I mean? But it didn't turn out that way. But there's something different than that. There's actually someone they can assign that does a child custody eval. And basically what you do is, not only does it cost a fortune, because I think it was like $5,000 for us to have 2 sessions with this person that were like an hour long each. But you go in there, they ask you basically what's going on, what's the story of how you got here, all that stuff. You explain it. They ask you some questions about, you know, your fitness as a parent and what you do with your child when they're in your custody and stuff like that. They also make you take like an IQ test and stuff to see where you stand. And then the next time they see you with the child to see how you two interact, to see if the child like is withdrawn from you or if they're all about you. And they kind of give an estimation at that point. It's worth it if you can afford it, and that's if the court doesn't just make you do it. But it is worth it because you can talk to this person and stuff like that, and the court is supposed to weigh heavy on their decision, because they sit down and they see you and they talk to you and stuff like that, so they can get a better understanding outside of a court setting how you are and how you act and the things you say. And if they write a recommendation and say, listen, I think this person is the better parent, the court is supposed to take that very seriously and say, well, we had a professional come in and look at the situation and say, this is obviously the better choice. So what questions are asked in this type of evaluation? Well, the examiner is going to address questions such as, you know, why do you want custody? Who has custody? What's the visitation like? What's the plan for the child when it comes to raising them, feeding them, clothing them? Where are they going to sleep? Where are they going to go to school? All that. What do you have to offer the child? And then basically, you know, how are you a good fit for this child? So you just want to come in there with everything that you could possibly have as far as proving how you're a competent parent. You don't want to go in there, I can't stress this enough, and I wish somebody had stressed it to me, you don't want to go in there disparaging. You don't want to do it in any sort of evaluations, you don't want to do it in mediation, you don't want to do it in court. Because if you go in there pissed off and you start disparaging the other person, all you're doing is looking incompetent. You're supposed to be, I guess, the adult in the situation, know the relationship ended and whatnot for whatever reason, and just only be there for the child's needs. And you have to really set emotion aside. Again, I'm a big offender of that, because there was a lot of times, especially with my BPD and stuff like that, where the intense emotions would be going so much from arguing and stuff like that all week that it would come out. And it didn't fare well because of that. Now we're going to get to the part with DYFS, also known as Child Protective Services, DCP&P, whatever you want to call them. I guess I'm biased on the situation. I have dealt with these people since I was 2 years old. My mom would constantly call them on my dad as like a vengeful tactic and stuff like that. So I don't have a good taste in my mouth when it comes to them. I didn't have a good taste in my mouth when I had to deal with them as an adult when it came to my daughter. Personally, I think that they are overworked and underpaid. But that's supposed to be the avenue that you go through if you believe that something is going on. If you believe your child is being harmed or abused or something like that, obviously them and the police would be the places to go. And they're supposed to come in and take care of the child. I mean, their mission statement is to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of children and support the families. The division is responsible for investigating allegations of child abuse and neglect, and when needed, arranging for child's protection to step in. But you only want to call them when they're truly needed, because if you go in there and you start making up bullshit stories about things that are happening, whether they are or aren't happening, that could easily just flip on you. Easily. And, you know, it's not to say that, you know, you want to use, like, because once they're in your life, they're in your life forever. I mean, you're always going to be on their radar and stuff like that. Me personally, when they came into our thing, I didn't really have anything to do with it. I had taken my daughter to the doctor. He noticed some irregularities and stuff like that, so he called them about the other parent. I didn't have any control of that whatsoever. If it were up to me, I would never have involved them whatsoever because I don't trust those people, and for good reason, because even when they came around this time, it was just a shitty time. I mean, I dealt with probably like a corrupt DYFS person. I mean, they scheduled a visit and stuff like that rather than doing a surprise visit. They interviewed my child in front of my ex. Like, it was just an absolute shit show. And then it was turned around the way the questions were asking and stuff like that to make it seem like I was making up things, which was the furthest thing from the truth. So, you only want to get them involved if it's absolutely needed, because once they're in, man, they're in. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, I mean, it's just going to make you look like the boy who cried wolf or the girl who cried wolf. Like, it could blow everything. And these things could really be happening. I mean, the things that you're alleging, they could really be happening. But all it takes is for somebody like that to brush you off to the side and make you look like a liar. And nobody's going to believe you. And these things are just going to continue to keep happening, which is exactly what happened in my situation. So you have to really tread lightly if you're going to get these people involved. I can't stress that enough. Only use it if it's absolutely necessary. Because when, you know, they come to your home, they're going to come and they're going to examine everything. They're going to look at if you have enough food, if you have running water, heat and electricity. They're also going to be satisfied that there's no hazardous conditions and stuff like that. And when the DYFS person told me, which they weren't even supposed to come to my house, like, it wasn't against me, but I guess, you know, to flip the coin, they wanted to see what was going on over here. I had everything set. I have child locks on every cabinet. I have them in the outlets. Like, there's nothing hazardous about my house. It's always spotless clean. They're going to check all that. They're going to check the bedrooms. But again, in my situation, when the woman came, she sat in the dining room with me just telling me that she was disparaging me as a parent, which is a no-no. I don't understand why she was doing it. But then all she did was just walk upstairs, peeked in my daughter's room for like 10 seconds, and then left. But she was already pissed off because she went to the wrong address. She actually went to an address from when I was a child, when they were called, because that's when I dealt with them, with my mom and stuff like that. And she was pissed off because she sat outside instead of ringing the doorbell, just waiting for somebody to come get her, but she was in a whole different township. So finally, you know, I got a call from her, and she asked, well, where the hell are you? I'm like, I'm sitting on the porch waiting for you. Like, what do you mean? She gives me the address. It's like, I haven't lived there in many, many years. I don't know what you're talking about. So she was already in a bad mood, and she proved that when she came and actually did the inspection. And then later when we went to court and stuff like that, to her testify as an expert witness, she couldn't remember a fucking thing about what happened that day. She couldn't remember what my daughter looked like. Again, do I expect her to? No, it was years prior, and they're overworked and underpaid. You can't remember every kid that you have a case with, especially if it was something that you only dealt with once. I thought it was kind of silly they called her out as an expert, but... And when it comes to that, you know what I mean? When it comes to the DYFS thing, try not to take it personally. They're there to do a job. They're there to interview you. They're there to check on the welfare of the child and stuff like that. Try not to take it personally if they're critiquing you and saying, hey, these are the things you should be doing, and, you know, this is unsafe right here. Don't get nervous and stuff and be like, oh my God, like, I'm not a good parent. Like, just take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so I need to put outlets and, you know, the electrical slots and stuff like that. Okay, we'll do that. Just don't take it too personally. take it with a grain of salt, make a mental note, and get it taken care of as soon as possible. You want to be honest with them, but don't be overly honest. Don't be too giving with information. If you're asked a question, answer the question. Don't go into a whole tirade or a story or something like that about unrelated topics because they're only asking a simple question. Don't give way too much information that's going to even bring up more questions. Just answer whatever they're asking you honestly, truthfully, and to the point. Another thing is expect to have things brought up from a long time ago. That's the same goes with court. There could be things on there, like in my situation, I didn't realize, one time we got into an argument, I didn't realize that I was being recorded, and that was brought up, and it was played like 5 times for them to emphasize, because I had only gotten loud with my ex twice in the 13 years I've known her. And one of those times, and the last time it happened to be that time when we were arguing on the phone, and I didn't realize I was being recorded at the time. So it probably wasn't a good thing, but I was so frustrated and things were boiling over for me and stuff like that that I just hit my breaking point. So, and it wasn't even like I was screaming or anything like that. I was just very upset with the fact that there was things being thrown in my face and my daughter was not being returned home when she was supposed to. But again, always expect, because especially in the state of New Jersey, one party can record you without your consent as long as they're talking in the actual recording. You only need one party's consent when they're recording. So you want to be careful about that. Be very, very careful about what you text, what you say over the phone, what you say in person, because you never know if a phone's sitting in the pocket recording everything. But you should just be cordial anyway. I get, again, like I've said, emotions get involved and stuff like that, and sometimes things get heated, but you just got to try your best. Just think about your child and just say, it's not worth it. It's not worth it, and just keep it calm. And another thing is that you want to be able to show any proof that they're going to ask you about. Any proof as far as, do you have health care for this child? What are her grades? Where's she going to school? Where's she sleeping? Like, you want to have all that proof ready to show them. Like, this is why I believe the child should be here. Now, when you actually go into it, which your lawyer will explain to you, there's various types of child custody. It's not just basic black and white. This actually can be split many different ways. And there's 4 main ones that it could really be split into. The first one is legal custody. Now, legal custody, the definition is, it's different than physical custody. What it is it allows parents to make long-term decisions about the child's upbringing and their well-being. So for me, I have joint legal custody and partial physical custody. So that's the difference. Like, I have to be involved in all the decision making and stuff like that when it comes to my child. Those decisions can't be made without my knowledge or anything. And when it comes to physical custody, she mostly lives with the other party and then visits with me. Like, the mother has, like, physical custody. So physical custody is the other one. Another one you want to determine. The definition of that is it's basically where the child lives on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's the easiest way to describe it. But those are the 2 things that they're going to look at before they come in and they say, well, this is what we want. The only way that they'll go against those 2 things is the other 2 forms of custody, which would be sole custody, which is where, one parent has complete custody of the child, and it's only usually offered in cases where, like, the other parent is abusive or neglectful or just not there at all. That's usually the only time you'll see someone get sole custody, because they really want both parents to be a part of the child's life. But if you're a complete fuck-up, they're just going to take it away from you, and you're just not going to have anything. And then you're going to spend the rest of your life, if you care about the child, fighting to get even partial custody. And then the other thing, which is like the most ideal thing that the court wants everyone to have, is joint custody. And that's where, when you split up and stuff like that, you split between the 2 parents' homes evenly. So, half the week it's with this one, half the week it's with this one. We all get together to make decisions about the child's well-being and stuff like that. But, you know what I mean? There's no actual, like, this is the house that they stay in. It's split evenly, 100% even. And obviously it's the most ideal, but it really depends. If you live in the same town and stuff like that, and you're a couple-minute drive or something like that, sure, that could happen easily. The kid goes to the same school, and they go to mom's this time, this dad's this time. It could work. But if you live a distance apart, it's not going to work. It's just not. That's a lot to consider, and usually that's what they'll say. If they see that you guys live a great distance apart, they usually won't give that unless there's some plan in place where that can work. But usually when a child's going to school and stuff, it's just not going to work. So what are some do's and don'ts when it comes to court? Like I said, and I'll just keep preaching it and preaching it and preaching it, do not disparage the other person. Do not. As tempting as it may be, just leave your feelings at the door. Be matter of fact, be professional, and be calm, and just stick to why you're there. Don't bite in if they start going after you or something like that, and then come unglued back at them because it makes you look extremely unprofessional. Just check your emotions at the door and stay even keel. And then just keep your eyes, this is another big thing too. When you're being questioned and stuff like that, you want to keep your eyes focused on the person asking you a question. Don't even cast a glare at the other party, because then they're going to be coming up with stories about how you're trying to intimidate them or anything like that. Just keep your eyes focused on where the questions are relying, or better yet, what I did a lot of the time is I kept looking up at the judge because I was trying to figure out like how she was sitting with some of the things that were being said, trying to read her emotions, her expressions and stuff like that to see, which way that they could possibly be leaning to. Or if it's too much, just focus on your attorney that's sitting next to you. Or if you don't have an attorney, if you have to sit there and just like take notes or something like that, just keep your focus off of the other party. Now, how does mental illness come up in court? So I'll say it and I'll say it again, just like they're supposed to say, mental illness does not disqualify you as a parent. It does not. The only way it would do that is if you were harming the child in some way. However, it will likely influence the decision. If it negatively impacts the parenting ability or the relationship with the child, the court will take that into account when determining parenting time. Even if it doesn't affect the child in a negative light, if they hear you have a documented mental illness, depending on who you have sitting up there and stuff like that, they may just take it away for that reason. Because even when mine was all said and done and stuff like that, they couldn't even give a clear reason as to why. They just kept blaming on the BPD and stuff like that, but there was no incident or anything like that that had occurred that had warranted me to be an unfit parent whatsoever. They just kept bringing it up and just saying because it exists, that's a problem. And I went through every hoop they asked me for. I went to counseling. I was doing DBT. I was going through their evaluators. I was going through child DIFUS and stuff like that. Like, I did everything they asked and proved that I was fit. I even got the child custody evaluator to say I was the better parent and should have custody. But it just wasn't good enough for whatever reason. And to this day, even when people ask me and stuff like that and know the situation, they're like, I still to this day cannot believe you don't have custody. And I don't know what to tell them. It's embarrassing because I don't even know why. I don't. And I can't explain it. So I usually don't talk about it and stuff like that because it's just too tough to talk about because I don't understand it. And I know that I'll never understand what the hell happened. Sometimes it just rolls that way. And there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to continue on, take the punches, and just keep going. So some questions when I posted this, when I posted that I was going to be doing this video and stuff like that, there's some people that reached out to me and actually asked some questions. So I'm going to answer some of those questions right now. So, will my kid be taken away from me if I have BPD? If your mental illness is going to influence the judge's decision, it's going to be to disqualify you, I guess. If it has to come up and it's coming up as an issue, like you're doing things or something like that, yeah, it can absolutely affect that. I mean, it really just depends on how serious it is. It depends on if you are getting help for it, if you're doing something about it, if you're taking medication for it. What medication are you taking? What are the side effects of it? All those things can come up. It's really something that, like, you could go to your local hospital where they have the mental health ward and stuff like that, and you can do like a 12-week or 12-session intake program where you go there once a week for 12 weeks and can talk to somebody and get a better understanding about that. But be careful when you do that, because if you go and do that, they can subpoena it on the other side and then look at it and present everything that you're doing to the court. So if you're going there generally to get help and talk about your issues and stuff like that because you're trying to be a better parent, just remember that they can pull those records and read them and embarrass the ever-loving shit out of you in court. And they tried that. At the time, I was going through some issues with my dad and stuff like that. Like, we were arguing because, it was a stressful time with money and, the stuff that was going on with my daughter and stuff like that. And I was talking to the therapist because genuinely I was just venting and stuff, and I was talking about like how frustrating it was and how he was constantly getting on me, and I was getting stressed out because of it because I had no control of the situation. And the other party's attorney tried to take that and spin it when my dad was on the stand to make it seem like we had some sort of dysfunctional relationship and try to get him to change his color about me. Obviously, I love my father, you know what I mean? I wasn't doing that to disparage him in any way, shape, or form. I was just stressed out at the time. But they tried to roll with that and turn it into something that I wasn't. So you need to really be careful when you're talking on that. Yeah, it's great to get the help and stuff like that, but remember, they can subpoena it. So be very, very careful. Another question. No, I'll circle back to that because we're going to talk about something else. So, just to reiterate while we're on the actual mental illness subject, because you have a mental illness, it does not make you a bad parent. It does not. It doesn't disqualify you as being a parent. It doesn't make it that there's something wrong with you. And I can't stress that enough. Because when you sit there and, especially with something like borderline, you didn't choose to have borderline. You didn't choose to have it. It's because one of your parents was neglectful or abusive or abandoned you or something like that. And that's what I try to explain to them in court. It's like, you're going to sit there and say that I'm going to be disqualified as a parent because I have BPD. When I got BPD from my mom, who I have no relationship whatsoever, so essentially, something that happened 30-something years ago, I'm paying for the sins of that. I can't be a parent because of what she did 30-something years ago. It makes absolutely no sense. If anything, I strive to be nothing like her. So I feel like that makes me a better parent because I'll always have that looming in the back of my head that I won't ever be like that. I would never walk away from my daughter or anything like that. Like, no matter how hard it gets or no matter how much I can't stand the other party, like, I would never do that. Never. And I think that's a real prevalent thing because of what happened in my past. So to be completely judged by that, I find that to be extremely disrespectful. But I don't make the judgment, you know what I mean? You're there to be judged by somebody impartially. So after you go through the entire court proceedings and stuff like that, you'll go in there, you'll get hearings, and you'll go through like preemptive things and, requests of evidence and all this stuff. And when you finally get to the nitty gritty, it's going to take a while, but when you finally do it, after you go through the testimonies and stuff like that, you'll go back for a final day to which the judge will read their verdict and stuff like that and explain to you what's going on. Now, the judge's decision basically is going to include what a visitation schedule is turned into. That includes like holidays, weekends, and stuff like that. When the non-custodial parent is entitled to their visitation, times, drop-off places, all that stuff. And then which parent is going to be considered the custodial parent. They're supposed to tell you why they choose these things and stuff like that, but they don't always do that. Mine was very vague with why she was doing it. It was mostly just seemed like the borderline and stuff like that, so it's hard to say. But all that stuff's going to be mapped out for you, and then they're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions or try to say, well, that's not reasonable, that's not it. In my case, because it was COVID time and stuff like that, basically what they were doing is they were doing everything over video chat. And when they were doing it over video chat, what happened was we weren't going into a court setting. So we only went into the testimonies, and then the final verdict went right back to, doing that. Because they didn't want to do the testimonies over the phone. It wasn't as personal, and everyone agreed that, they would just do COVID protocols and stuff like that to keep everyone safe. But they gave the final verdict that way, and you're supposed to have your video on and stuff like that. And I knew within the first couple minutes, just the way the judge was talking, that it wasn't going to go in my favor. And I got so upset, I just turned the camera off and I walked out of the room. Like, I couldn't even deal with it anymore. I didn't want to hear it. It was just probably the worst thing that ever happened in my life was that day. And it was so much to take in, and instead of being like a crying shit show on the phone, I just needed to step out of the room. I was still listening from a distance, but like I knew right then and there, like it wasn't going to go my way. And it was just really tough. So, you want to, again, take it with a grain of salt. Just because you lose and stuff like that doesn't mean that it's over. There's always going to be other opportunities and stuff like that to see your child and be a part of their life. And, it's not over. It's not like it's an end all. It's one thing if you get your child completely taken away from you, but if you're given partial custody or something like that, they're still in your life. It's not like they're dead or gone or left you. Like, they're still there. And it is tough. It's a hard pill to swallow. Like, it was rough for me for a long time, but then it got easier over time. And it is tough, but you don't want to do anything stupid or anything like that, but just because you lost, try your best to keep your emotions in check and, deal with it. Like, for me, I decided to sign up on my own for mental health counseling and stuff like that after that to kind of deal with the loss that I was feeling. And it helped, and I did 14 weeks of it and stuff like that, and, it helped get me through a little bit. It helped me understand better, what was going on and whatnot. Because even the person that had diagnosed me, the second person in my life that diagnosed me, when they were called up to the stand and stuff like that, and they were asking him about the borderline and stuff, he said it perfectly. He was just like, just because he has borderline, you guys are treating it like a scarlet letter. It's not a scarlet letter. It doesn't deter him from being a parent. Like, he's more self-destructive in his head than he is to anything else. Like, he's not doing anything to the child. There's no documented things. There's no issues or anything like that. But again, when people hear mental illness, they're just like, well, there's something wrong with them. They can't be the parent. It's not always the case. It's not. Not at all. Obviously some mental illnesses are worse than others, but it really depends on where you are on that spectrum. How you're living day to day and stuff like that. Obviously, if your mental illness is turning you into an alcoholic or a drug addict or something, yeah. Obviously, that's not going to be a fit for the child. But just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean you have to be a drug addict or an alcoholic. So it really depends on how you handle it and what you do to prove that you're a worthy parent. How far will you go for your child to have them in your life? That depends on you. But it doesn't define you just because you have it. So I got some questions. One of the questions was, hey, Nick, who wins most of the custody battles? Do you have any statistics on that? According to what I looked up and stuff like that, because I wanted to get more factual information than just guessing on my own, because when you think about it and you ask most people, most people will tell you that it's biased, that women usually win, that they usually side with the mother, because historically, that used to be the case. The mothers, you're talking way back, mothers used to stay home and stuff like that, and fathers would go to work, but obviously we've evolved as a country, and everybody's treated fairly, so things have changed and things have shifted. Now you're starting to see in today's day, there's actually a lot of fathers that are stay-at-home dads and stuff like that because, the wife or significant other has a career that they want to attend, and, maybe the father's a little more nurturing in that aspect. So it can go either way. But historically, women have always had the upper hand with being awarded child custody. And the statistics show that women win child custody rights staggering 90% of the time. Even though fathers play an important role in their kids' lives, it's still not always enough because, mothers are supposed to be that nurturing side and stuff like that, whereas to fathers are still looked at as not having that. Another question. You said you live in New Jersey. Do you know, if that's a good state to win custody if you're a father? I looked into it. There's actually a bunch of states on this list that says Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Kentucky, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Dakota, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. Those are the ones that tend to give fathers a more roundabout of getting 50% custody at least. I didn't experience that on my own, but you know what I mean? My dad won custody of me and my brother in 2 separate trials with 2 different parents, so I guess it really depends. There's a friend of mine too who actually has the same attorney as me, and he actually went from having 0 custody to having full custody, so it's possible. It's absolutely possible. I guess it really just depends on the judge and, what your case is on an individual basis, like what you're going through. Another question. How long do most custody battles last? It really depends. I mean, it depends on your situation. And like my situation, COVID happened, so that really threw a wrench into it and basically added a whole nother year to it that was just unnecessary because of postponements and shutdowns and all this other bullshit that was going on. So it really depends on the times and the situation and if you're paying your attorney or if there's issues with that. If you're not going to the things the court assigns you to go to, it really depends. I mean, some of them could be as little as 30 days if you do like an emergent hearing and stuff like that and prove incompetent of the other person. It could just be wham, bam, and done. I mean, it's rare, but it can. And then, I've heard of ones that basically have gone on for like 5 or 6 years. I mean, mine went for 4, almost to the day. It was the same month and everything, September to September. So it really depends. There's a lot of things to go into and stuff like that. What type of custody would you have liked to have other than the one you currently have? I would have liked to have joint legal custody. I mean, obviously I want my daughter to be here 24/7, but, you know, I would never want to take her away from her mom. So, I mean, realistically, I would like to have joint legal custody where we live close enough that it's literally a 50-50 split. Half the week she's with me, half the week she's with her. I mean, realistically, that would have been the best thing, but it just didn't. And last question I got was, do you know the chances of a father getting custody? Do you know the percentage? I looked it up. Apparently, and this is nationwide, apparently the chances of a father getting full custody of their child is only 18%. So, if they're not biased and stuff like that about men, why is that number so low? Why wouldn't it be closer to the 50 margin? I mean, and you're going off of a national statistic. And I looked on this on several different sites, and that was the same number that seemed to be passed around. So, again, if fathers are just as equally as important as mothers when it comes to raising a child, why wouldn't that number be higher? Because obviously there's some sort of bias going on. But that's everything I have as far as the child custody situation and stuff like that goes. It's tough. It is. And it's hard to keep your emotions in check and stuff like that. But if you stay matter of fact and you stay on course, there's a way to do it. And again, there's so many things out of your control about who's reviewing your case and what's going on with it and stuff like that. It's hard to really determine how things are going to go for you until you're actually in it. Try to read the room. Try to just be matter of fact and keep your emotions in check and dress presentable and be honest with your attorney. Be honest with the judge and stuff like that. Don't be so forthcoming with information. Just simply keep it to the questions you're asked. I mean, that's the easiest way to go about it. It's tough, and it's extremely expensive, and it's extremely, extremely depressing. And, you know, you're going to have things brought up about you that maybe you're ashamed of and stuff like that, and you got to be able to just roll with the punches and keep going. I mean, I believe that both parents are equally as important in a child's life, and, you know, they should both be involved just as much. And it's a shame that there's a lot of fathers' rights that are being violated and stuff like that. And, you know, the worst thing you could do to your child is parental alienation. To belittle the other parent in front of them and stuff like that, or prevent them from seeing the other one just because you're bitter about what happened in your relationship. It's the absolute worst thing you could do to a child. And then eventually when they figure out, because you hear a lot of stories and stuff like that, when kids figure out that, you know, mom sat there and talked so much crap about dad that he was never there and stuff like that, and then they grow up and they find out that dad was actually trying the whole time, they're just going to wind up hating you for it because you made up all this bullshit. You know, and it goes both ways. You know, fathers do it the same way. Fathers sit there and say, oh, your mother's horrible and she did this, 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 and this, and this. Why are you telling your kid that? It's not worth it. It's not. You're only going to hurt them. You shouldn't be trying to color their opinion on the other parent. You should be sitting there trying to help them understand why it's happening, that you both still love them, and that you're both still going to be in their life. You may not be together, but you're still going to be there for the rest of their lives. And if you can get along with the other party, it's great. Me and mine don't get along, but we have an understanding that when it comes to facts and stuff like that, that we get the facts out there and try to make the conversation as quickly as possible before it explodes into something else. And that's the best that I ever expect it to be. I mean, I don't ever expect us to be buddies or anything like that. We don't really care for each other too much, but as long as we can be on point with what's going on and stuff like that, get the information out and just keep going, that's the best that you could hope for. Not arguing in front of the child or anything like that. You don't want to do that. You know, keep your emotions in check. And at the end of the day, I have to say it again, mental illness does not defer you from being a good parent. It doesn't. Don't let it define you. You are who you are. You're important. You're special. You have to just roll with it. Get the help that you need. Get your stuff in check. Get the evidence and stuff like that that you need as far as proving your competence, and just prove that you're above the stigma. Because you are. Just because you have a mental illness doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't. And no matter what anybody wants to look at and say like that, you're not. So just do your best, and just remember, you created this life. You have to be there for it. You have to support it. You have to teach it things in life. You want to give, like what my father always said, you want to try to give your child at least a 50% better lifestyle than you had. Because that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. It's all about them. Having a child is supposed to be a selfless thing, not a selfish thing. So it's just something to think about. Now tomorrow, we're actually going to come back, and the reason being is because I was asked, and I've seen a lot on like the chats and stuff like that, a lot of people can't get access apparently to DBT. And I can understand that, because when you try to go through it, there's a waiting list because they can only do it a certain amount of time, and there has to be enough people signed up for it. And I mean, it's like a year commitment to get into it. And it's DBT. CBT is something different, which I'll go over tomorrow. It's a shorter span version of it. But a lot of people can't get access to it. Now, you can actually go on Amazon and you can buy a DBT workbook, which is what we're going to be going over tomorrow. And every Wednesday, we're going to do a couple pages and stuff like that. So anybody that wants to come in that doesn't have accessibility to it or just wants to review the things they learned about it and stuff like that, they can jump on and actually participate in it. Now, if you don't have the workbook, you can absolutely take notes and stuff like that, because I'm going to ask the questions that are in it and stuff. I'll go over my own answers and stuff, and if anybody wants to join in and talk about their own experience and stuff, we can dive into that and we can talk about it. But it's just something to give back. I mean, as I was explaining earlier to someone I was talking to, it's that the reason why I'm doing it and stuff like that is because, you know, you could sit there and when you're diagnosed with something, you could just take it hard and just be like falling into yourself and stuff like that, or you can give back. You can give back to the community. And I think that borderline is grossly overlooked. So if I can do my part in giving back to the borderline community and stuff like that to help each other, or even anybody that's going through depression, anxiety, anything like that, then that's what you should be using it for. You should use your own experiences and stuff like that to help out people who feel like that no one understands their experiences or anything like that. You want to help out. It's all about giving back. We're all one united thing. So we got to start acting like it. We got to start being a part of each other's lives and, you know, being there for each other. Because running to like the knife or the bottle or drugs or anything like that, it's not helping anybody at all. But if we could be there for each other and just spend that hour, let's just say on Wednesday, going over that, and maybe that night somebody learned a different technique or something like that and it helped them in that moment. That in itself is the most rewarding thing you could possibly do. And it's not to look for any sort of recognition, because that's not what I'm doing it for whatsoever. I could care less if I had 10 followers or 10,000 followers. It absolutely makes no difference to me. I just want to help. I want to give back. And that's like the thing with the books and stuff like that, like I always explain. I don't make any money off these books. I make like $1 off of the book. I didn't get into writing to become rich. I got into writing so that when people read my stories and stuff like that, they didn't feel like they were alone. That they could understand the more complex styles of life that normal people wouldn't be subjected to. It's really all it was. And it was very therapeutic for me to actually write and stuff. So it's a give and a take. But again, it's like the Wednesday thing, doing that with DBT and stuff like that. Yes, I am offering my services, which I'm not a mental professional whatsoever, but I'm offering my services from what I learned when I was in DBT. And also it helps me by doing the workbook while helping other people. So it's a give and a take. So tomorrow we're going to join back up at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to do that. Then on Thursday, we're going to be jumping into Chapter 3 of Paradise Reborn, where I'll read it to you guys, and then I will go over the Easter eggs and stuff like that. It's called Home is Where the Heart Is, and it's another good chapter about Gwen getting back to Reedsville and seeing where everything is after the conclusion of the last book, which was 2 years prior. So make sure you check that out. Like I always say in my things, if you guys want to read along with us for Thursday and stuff like that, you can absolutely buy the books on Amazon. Paradise Reborn and the Souls of Paradise is the very first one. They're 99 cents for the Kindle version, so you can check that out and you can read along with us. Or if you just want to hear the audio version of it, I try my best to read it and do it. I don't know how good I am in it, but, you know, at least you'll be able to hear it. So, maybe. For those of you who joined tonight and logged in, I appreciate, you know, listening and stuff like that. If you have any questions, like personal questions about maybe you're going through a custody issue or anything like that, and you want to reach out, my line is always open. I try to message people back as much as possible. I find that some of them are scammers, just looking for some, you know, sort of thing. Some of them are actually genuine, but I do try to get back to everybody as much as possible.